My daughter dropped her off on a Friday afternoon, holding a pink overnight bag with one handle torn and a sticker of a faded cartoon unicorn on the side. She didn't even come in, just stood on the porch with her car running. "Just watch her for the weekend, Mom," she said, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear like she was late for something far more important than her own daughter. "I just need 2 days. I'll be back Sunday night." I looked down at little Amelia, all of 5 years old, holding her stuffed rabbit with one eye missing and a juice box in her hand. She didn't say a word, just looked up at me like I was a stranger she was supposed to trust. I remember forcing a smile, trying not to show my worry. "Of course," I said. "We'll have fun, right, baby girl?" She nodded slightly, and my daughter gave me a quick peck on the cheek. No eye contact. Just turned, walked back to her car, and drove off without even rolling the window down to wave. At the time, I didn't think much of it. It wasn't the first time I'd watched Amelia. She used to stay with me for weekends when she was a toddler, back when my daughter still had hope in her eyes. But this time felt different. The bag was thrown together, no toothbrush, only one pair of socks, no pajamas. There were no hugs, no explanations, just that vague promise. "I'll be back Sunday night." That night I made spaghetti for dinner, her favourite when she was younger, and we watched cartoons until she fell asleep on the couch, rabbit still in her arms. I carried her to the guest room, the one I'd kept clean just in case they ever wanted to stay over. I stood at the doorway longer than I should have, watching her sleep. There was something about the way her tiny body curled under the blanket, like she was used to sleeping in unfamiliar places. It broke my heart. Saturday morning, she woke up early and helped me feed the birds out back. She barely spoke, just nodded or shrugged. I tried asking about her school, her friends, what she liked to do, but she just said, "I don't know." Like those things didn't exist anymore. I called my daughter that afternoon, straight to voicemail, tried again that evening. Same thing. I figured maybe she was working late. She always said she was overwhelmed. "I'm trying, Mom," she'd say on the phone during her rushed check-ins. "It's just so much sometimes." I used to believe that. Sunday came and went. No text, no call, just silence. I left the porch light on. I set 2 plates at the table just in case. Amelia sat quietly and ate the grilled cheese I made her, then asked if she could sleep in my bed that night. I said yes. That's when I started to realize this wasn't just a weekend favor. This was something else, something colder, something planned. Monday morning, I dressed Amelia in one of my old t-shirts tied at the waist and walked her to the local elementary school. The secretary gave me a long look, like she wanted to ask if I had legal custody, but she didn't. They let her sit in the back of a kindergarten classroom while I filled out paperwork I didn't fully understand. On the way home, I tried calling again. Nothing. I sat on the couch, phone in hand, staring at the door. And I remember whispering to myself, "She's not coming back, is she?" I didn't cry. Not then. Because when you're a mother long enough, you learn how to grieve quietly while still packing lunches and folding tiny socks. That was 5 years ago. Amelia is 10 now, and I've been just watching her for the weekend every single day since. I didn't sleep much that Sunday night. I kept listening for a knock at the door, headlights pulling into the driveway, a familiar voice calling, "Hey, I'm back." But all I heard was the creak of the old house and Amelia's soft breathing next to me. She slept, curled up like a kitten, her little fingers still wrapped around the ear of that stuffed rabbit. I lay beside her, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was overreacting. Maybe her phone had died. Maybe she got stuck somewhere. Maybe she'd walk in the next morning, laughing, saying, "Mum, I'm so sorry, I lost track of time." But Monday morning came and nothing changed. No missed calls, no texts, no car in the driveway. I checked her social media, something I never liked doing, but I had to know. No updates, no photos, just stillness. I made Amelia pancakes for breakfast, shaped like hearts, and told her it was a special day. She smiled for the first time since Friday. A small one, quick, but it was there. She didn't ask about her mum, not once. I took her to school again. The secretary now asked for emergency contact information. I gave mine. She didn't press. It was a small town. People notice, but they don't always ask. After dropping her off, I sat in the car for a long time, just parked across the street, hands gripping the steering wheel, heart pounding like I'd been running. Back home, I tried calling again. This time the number didn't even ring. It went straight to voicemail. That's when the cold really hit me, like ice climbing up my spine. I texted, "Please let me know you're okay. Amelia keeps asking, I'm worried." It showed as delivered, but no response. I opened the pink overnight bag again. I hadn't looked at it since Friday. There was nothing inside but one shirt, a juice box, a half-empty colouring book, and an unopened granola bar. Not even a toothbrush. That's when it hit me. This wasn't a mistake. She didn't forget to pack more clothes. She didn't forget to call. She had planned this. I remember going into the laundry room and closing the door like I used to when David was little, and I didn't want him to see me cry. I sat on the floor between the dryer and the wall and let the tears fall, silent, hot, bitter. Not just from hurt, from guilt, from the slow realization that I should have seen this coming, that there were signs I ignored. She'd been distant for months, saying she was tired, that Amelia was too much, that she didn't know if she could keep doing it. But every time I offered to help, she'd change the subject or shut down, and now she was just gone. That evening, when I picked Amelia up from school, she asked, "Did Mommy call?" I froze, then I lied. I said, "Not yet, baby." "But maybe tomorrow." She didn't say anything, just stared out the window the whole ride home. I made mac and cheese for dinner. She pushed it around on her plate and asked if she could have cereal instead. I said yes. That night, she didn't ask to sleep in my bed. She just crawled in without a word. I held her close, and in the darkness I whispered, "I'm not going anywhere, okay?" She didn't answer, but her hand reached for mine and held on tight. That's when I stopped waiting for the door to open again, and I started figuring out how to be enough for both of us. It was a Wednesday morning, a week and a half after Amelia arrived, when I noticed it. A drawing on the hallway wall, done in bright orange crayon, a crooked little house with a chimney, a stick figure with curly hair, me I suppose, and a small girl holding hands with her. Above them, in uneven letters, it read, "Me and Grandma's house." At first, my instinct was to sigh. I had just painted that hallway last spring, but the moment I walked closer, my heart softened. It wasn't vandalism, it was declaration. She was making sense of her new world, one crayon stroke at a time, and deep down, I knew that wall would never be painted over again. Amelia didn't say a word about it when she came home from school. She just dropped her backpack by the door and headed to the kitchen. I watched her pour herself cereal without asking, tiny independence growing in a girl who hadn't asked to be left behind. I couldn't stop staring at the crayon drawing all evening. It said everything she hadn't voiced. Her mother hadn't called, not once, no text, no knock on the door, no envelope in the mail. I stopped checking my phone every 5 minutes. The silence had settled in like wallpaper. That night I gently asked her, "Do you want to talk about your mum?" She shook her head. "She's busy," she said softly. I nodded. "Okay, but if you ever do." She didn't finish her dinner, just sat there, fiddling with her spoon. Then she asked, "Are you going to have to give me back?" I blinked. That one cut deep. "I don't think so, sweetheart," I said carefully. "Promise." I looked her straight in the eyes and said, "I promise I won't let anyone take you away from me." That night, I stayed up going through every drawer and file cabinet I owned, digging out old birth certificates, copies of power of attorney papers from years back when I helped my daughter pay rent. I didn't know what I was looking for exactly, just something that made me feel less helpless. The next morning, when I brought Amelia her lunchbox, she'd drawn another picture, this time on paper. Same little house, same curly-haired woman. But now there was a dog, a son, and in big letters across the top, "My home." I didn't have the heart to tell her she wasn't legally mine, not yet. But that morning, I made up my mind. If no one was coming for her, I would stay. I would fight. I would be the home she drew in crayon. By the third week, calling her had become a ritual. Pointless, painful, but something I did anyway. I'd stare at my phone like it might finally blink back to life with her name. I left voicemails I never wanted to rehear. "Hey, just checking in again. Amelia's okay. She misses you." Then, days later, "You need to call me back. This isn't fair." Then finally, "I know what you've done and it's not going away." Still nothing. I began to realize I was no longer waiting for her to return. I was waiting to feel less betrayed, not just by my daughter, but by the idea of motherhood itself. I raised her alone. I worked 2 jobs when her father left. I made sacrifices I never named. And still, somehow, she'd looked at me, her own mother, and decided I was disposable. The worst part? She knew I wouldn't say no. That's why she chose me. Not because I was her last resort, but because I was her safest bet. The one who would clean up after her decisions without screaming, without slamming a door. She counted on my silence. Meanwhile, Amelia started unpacking her presence into my life in subtle ways. She claimed the left side of the bathroom sink. She stacked her books on the coffee table in alphabetical order. She hung her backpack on the back of my kitchen chair. These weren't accidents. These were declarations. I live here now. I didn't know how to prepare for that. I didn't know what came next, legally, emotionally, financially. My social security check barely covered bills. I had no guardianship, no rights, just love. That Thursday, the school counsellor called. Amelia had been quiet in class, drawing a lot. Not disruptive, just distant. The counsellor asked if I was aware of any changes in the home environment. I paused. Her mother left her with me almost a month ago and hasn't come back. There was silence on the line. Then, "You may want to speak with someone about long-term arrangements." I hung up the phone and stared out the kitchen window. The bird feeder was empty. The yard needed mowing. Amelia's shoes were by the door, a little muddy, like she'd run through the back lot chasing squirrels. There was no plan. There was no roadmap. I was a 69-year-old woman suddenly in charge of a child with no legal name to claim it and no end in sight. But somehow, in the middle of that storm of not knowing, I found myself making a grocery list for things I hadn't bought in years. Grape juice boxes, glitter glue, shampoo for fine curls, socks with animals on them. Because sometimes the only way to survive abandonment is to act like it's not happening and just keep feeding love into the spaces someone else left empty. It was a cold North Dakota morning when I walked Amelia to her first real day of kindergarten as my daughter's silence officially turned into absence. Her tiny hand slipped into mine without a word, like we'd been walking this path for years. I had to borrow a neighbour's help the night before just to get her enough school supplies, glue sticks, folders, those blunt-tip scissors they always ask for. I had no idea what I was doing. No legal papers, no guardian documents, no plan. Just a handwritten note in her lunchbox that read, "I love you, Grandma." At the front desk, the secretary looked up. "You're her," she trailed off. "Grandmother," I said. She waited, pen hovering over the form. "Legal guardian?" I smiled, tight-lipped. "For now, I'm the only one here." She didn't argue, probably had seen worse. That's the thing about small towns, they don't ask unless it's their business, and even then, they do it gently. In the classroom, Amelia stayed close to my leg like a shadow. The teacher, Mrs. Kessler, knelt to her level with a warmth that made me tear up right there. "We're so happy to have you here, Amelia." Amelia didn't respond. She just nodded and slipped into the circle of children sitting on a bright blue rug. I stood in the doorway longer than I should have, my coat still on, unsure if I should smile or sob. That walk home was the quietest I've ever taken. I half expected my phone to buzz in my pocket. It didn't. So I just listened to the crunch of frost under my boots and replayed that morning 1,000 times. At home, I wandered around like a ghost, made the bed, folded her pajamas, straightened her shoes, opened her crayon box and smelled the wax like it might tell me what to do. I'd been a mother before, but never a mother like this. Never to someone who didn't know she'd been abandoned. Never to someone who still held on to the hope that it was temporary. That evening, I made chicken and rice. Amelia ate in silence, swinging her feet beneath the table. Then, without warning, she asked, "Will I be here forever?" My heart skipped. I looked at her, trying not to let my voice crack. "You'll be here as long as you need to be, as long as you want to be." She looked down at her plate. "Okay." Then she took her spoon and tapped it against her cup 3 times. I didn't know why, I still don't, but I joined her, tapping mine in rhythm. That night I tucked her into bed and kissed her forehead. "Tomorrow will be easier," I whispered. "Because I'll know the way," she said. And just like that I realized we were both learning a new map. One day at a time, one goodbye at a time, one promise that this time someone would stay. Amelia's 6th birthday came exactly 5 weeks after she first arrived. By then, I had memorized the rhythm of her days, how she liked her toast cut, which storybook she always asked for before bed, how she sang to herself softly when she coloured. But I hadn't planned for her birthday. I didn't even realize it was coming until I found a drawing she made with "My birthday, February 9th, written in bold pink marker across the top. It hit me like a slap. I used to make cakes for my daughter every year, back when she still looked at me like I mattered. Now, here I was trying to make a little girl feel remembered when her own mother hadn't even called. Not once, Not even to say, "Happy birthday." I scrambled to pull something together. I took $20 from the emergency envelope in the kitchen drawer and went to the store. I bought a boxed cake mix, rainbow frosting, and one small doll wrapped in plastic. It wasn't much, but it was what I could manage. The morning of her birthday, I woke her up with a song. Her eyes lit up, wide and sleepy, and for a brief second I saw the child inside her, the one who still believed in surprise. We decorated the living room with hand-cut paper chains and taped up balloons that kept falling off the walls. She wore a crown made of foil. At noon, I set the cake down and lit 6 candles. I held my phone in my hand, just in case. I told her, "Blow them out and make a wish." She closed her eyes, breathed in, and paused, then blew gently. She didn't say her wish, but I saw it written in the corners of her silence. She wished her mother would call. I checked my phone 5 times that hour. Nothing. She opened her doll and smiled politely. "Thank you, Grandma." I hugged her, and for a moment I wanted to scream. I wanted to yell at the wind, at the sky, at my daughter, wherever she was, for making me do this alone. For turning this child's first real memory of her birthday into a patchwork of good intentions and empty chairs. Later that night, I found her in the living room, holding the doll and whispering to it. She turned to me and asked, "Do you think Mommy forgot my birthday?" I didn't lie, not this time. I knelt beside her and said, "I don't know, sweetheart." But I didn't forget. I never will. She leaned her head on my shoulder and sighed. Then that's enough. And it had to be, because when someone chooses to walk away, all you can do is build something stronger in the space they left behind. Even if that something is made of cake mix and tin foil and a grandmother's fierce, quiet love. The day after Amelia's birthday, I sat down at the kitchen table with a stack of bills, my checkbook, and a calculator older than she was. I'd been keeping track in my head, but now the numbers were real, inked in pen and pressing down on my breath. Groceries for a child weren't the same as groceries for one old woman. Milk, snacks, fruit she'd barely touch, cereal boxes that vanished in 2 days, juice, laundry detergent for the clothes she came home from school covered in. My pension was enough to keep me warm, fed, and quiet. It was not enough for ballet classes, field trips, or dentist appointments. Still, I made it work. You do what you must. You stop buying the expensive arthritis cream. You cancel cable. You eat oatmeal for dinner so she can have chicken nuggets. I never once told her we couldn't afford something, but she asked, "Grandma, are we poor?" I smiled. "No, honey, we're just smart with what we have." She accepted that. Kids do. But every time I had to say no to something small, like a school book fair or a birthday invite that needed a gift, I felt a pinch inside that had nothing to do with money. One morning, while clipping coupons, I realized I hadn't bought anything for myself in over a month. No new shoes, no coffee out. I even cut my own hair in the bathroom mirror with kitchen scissors. Amelia walked in halfway through and said, "You look like a movie star." I didn't, but her eyes meant it, so I laughed and hugged her, hair clippings falling between us. That night, I looked through old photo albums, pictures of my daughter when she was Amelia's age. I found one where she was smiling in the sun, arms full of wildflowers. I traced her face with my finger and whispered, "Where did you go?" The weight of betrayal never really lands all at once. It comes in waves, in the empty seat across the table, in the phone that never rings, in the quiet ache of knowing you raised someone who could walk away from their own child without looking back. But I had a choice. I could become bitter, or I could become better for Amelia. So I opened a new notebook. I wrote down every expense. I made a list of needs, wants, and only if things get better. I found a food bank nearby. I applied for assistance. I swallowed my pride like a cold pill. Because love isn't always what you say, it's what you sacrifice, quietly, daily, without applause. And I was willing to give her everything I had left in this life, even if it meant there'd be nothing left for me. It was early spring when the knock came. Not a neighbour, not a friend. Two people in crisp clothes with solemn faces and folders in their hands. I knew before they even spoke. "Ma'am," the woman said, "we're with Child Protective Services. We received a report and wanted to follow up on the welfare of a minor, Amelia." My knees nearly gave out. I invited them in, hands trembling, heart thudding like a drum. Amelia was at school, thank God. I offered coffee out of habit. They declined. Sat down in my living room and pulled out a clipboard. The woman asked gently, "How long has your granddaughter been in your care?" I took a breath. "Since February, almost 3 months." "Were you given legal guardianship?" I shook my head. "Her mother said it would just be for the weekend, but she never came back. She hasn't called. She hasn't sent anything. She's gone." The man scribbled notes. The woman's eyes softened. "Do you know where the mother is now?" "No," I whispered. "She disappeared." They asked about Amelia's school, her health, her diet, her emotional state. I had answers for everything. Report cards, drawings, her favourite snacks, even the nightlight she wouldn't sleep without. I showed them her room, clean and bright, the crayon drawings still proudly taped to the wall. They inspected gently. They saw the love in the way her shoes were lined up by the door, the way her toothbrush sat next to mine, the lunch menu pinned on the fridge. They stayed for nearly an hour. When they stood to leave, the woman paused. "We'll need to open a case," she said, "but off the record, she's lucky to have you." That night, I didn't tell Amelia. I couldn't. I just held her a little longer during story time. The next morning, I stood outside the school, watching her walk through the doors with that brave little backpack. And I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel before. Fear. Fear that someone might come and say, "She's not yours." Because the truth was, I wasn't prepared to fight. I didn't have money for lawyers. I didn't have a husband to lean on. I didn't even have a printer that worked. All I had was this child who now called me home. So that afternoon, I called the local legal aid office. I told them everything. I started filling out the forms. I didn't know what I was doing, but I knew why I was doing it. Because if the world was going to come and ask, "Why should you raise her?" I'd be ready to say, "Because I never left." It was a Saturday morning when Mrs. Talbot, my neighbour from 2 doors down, showed up at the porch holding a large plastic bag. She smiled gently, her hair tied up in a messy bun, flowers still dust in her sleeves. "My granddaughter outgrew these. I figured Amelia might need them." I stood there a second too long, blinking. Then I smiled. "Thank you, Linda. That's very kind." Inside the bag were jeans with butterfly patches, t-shirts with cartoon cats, 3 pairs of sneakers, and even a winter coat with a working zipper, something Amelia's current one lacked. There were socks with lace trim, a purple scarf, and a pair of polka-dotted rain boots. Amelia sat on the rug and pulled each item out like it was treasure. "This one smells like cookies," she squealed, hugging a fuzzy sweater to her chest. I watched her from the kitchen doorway, my heart both full and aching. Because I shouldn't be here, at least not like this. I shouldn't be relying on the quiet kindness of neighbours to clothe a child that wasn't legally mine. I shouldn't be rationing eggs or counting quarters in the checkout line. I shouldn't be 69 years old wondering if I'd have to sell my car just to pay for school supplies come August. And yet, when I looked at Amelia twirling in her new polka dot dress, giggling like a storm of joy had cracked open her chest, I knew I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Later that day, Linda texted me, "You're doing great. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." I stared at the message for a long time. I hadn't cried in days. But that text, those 5 simple words, cracked me open. Because most days I felt like I was failing, like I was holding everything together with duct tape and bedtime stories. I hadn't bought a single thing for myself since Amelia arrived. Every dollar I had went into filling her life with normalcy. That night, while folding the new old clothes, I found a note tucked into the pocket of the purple coat. A child's handwriting, almost illegible, but clear enough. For someone who needs it more than me. I closed my eyes and held that note to my heart. Because that's what we all are, really. People passing along love we're not even sure we received fully ourselves. And sometimes the smallest act, a bag of used clothes, a text from a neighbour, a child's forgotten note, can remind you that you're not invisible, that what you're doing matters, that even if the world left you behind, someone still sees you trying. It was a rainy Wednesday when I finally decided to call from the landline. My old rotary phone sat in the corner like a relic, but something told me to try from it. I'd tried my cell countless times, voicemail, silence, nothing. But this time the phone rang. Once, twice, then click. A voice answered, not hers, a man, confused. "Hello?" I froze. I'm looking for my daughter, Lydia Carter." There was a pause, then he said, "This is her boyfriend's number. She doesn't live here anymore." I took a breath. "I'm her mother. She left her daughter, Amelia, with me. I haven't heard from her in months." More silence. "I don't know what to tell you. She doesn't talk about that. She changed her number a while back." Changed her number. I hung up before I could cry. My hands were shaking. My chest felt like it was caving in. I walked over to the couch and sat in the dark. I stared at Amelia's school photo on the fridge, her little face smiling at a world that didn't deserve her. She hadn't just disappeared, she had erased us. And I knew in that moment why my calls never went through. She had blocked me, not by accident, not because she was overwhelmed, but because she wanted distance from her daughter, from me, from the responsibility of motherhood she never really accepted in the first place. That night when Amelia asked, "Did Mommy call today?" I smiled gently and said, "Not today, sweetie." She nodded like she already knew, like she'd stopped hoping. After she went to sleep, I sat with a cup of tea and stared at the wall for hours. My daughter had cut me out like a blemish in her life, but she had left behind something she couldn't erase. Amelia's laughter echoing down the hallway. And maybe that's how legacies really work, not in who we raise, but in what we choose to protect when someone else walks away. I promised myself then and there, no more waiting, no more begging. It was time to file for full custody because Amelia deserved a family who picked up the phone, and I would be that voice, even if it meant speaking loud enough to be heard over the silence my daughter left behind. The legal aid office was a beige building with flickering lights and chairs that squeaked when you sat. I brought a file folder filled with scribbled notes, copies of Amelia's school documents, and a calendar with every missed call and unanswered message I had logged for months. I sat there with my worn purse in my lap, knees pressed together like I was back in Sunday school. When they finally called my name, I stood slowly. The woman assigned to my case, a soft-voiced attorney named Meredith, asked me to start from the beginning. I did. Every broken promise, every silent day. Every moment my granddaughter had asked, "When's Mommy coming back?" Meredith listened without interrupting. Then she gently said, "We can file for kinship guardianship. It's not the same as adoption, but it gives you legal authority." "Will she be safe?" I asked. "Can anyone come and take her away?" "With this," she said, tapping the paperwork, "you'll be recognized as her guardian. It won't be easy, but it's possible." She slid the papers across the table. I looked at the lines and boxes and blank spaces. I hadn't signed anything this important in years. I held the pen like it might burn me. Then I wrote my name. When I got home that evening, Amelia was colouring at the kitchen table. I told her we were doing some important paperwork so she could stay with me forever. She looked up slowly, eyes round. "You mean like always?" I nodded. "Yes, baby, always." She didn't say anything, just got up, walked around the table and hugged me tight. The kind of hug that tells you a child knows more than they say. That night, while she slept, I sat back down at the same table. I looked at the forms and whispered to myself, "I am her home now." It wasn't just about custody. It was about claiming something no one else had shown up for. It was about standing in the gap between what was and what should have been. Because sometimes love has to be written in ink, filed in triplicate, stamped by a stranger in a courthouse. And sometimes it starts in a quiet kitchen with a girl and a grandmother and a story nobody expected to write. But one they'd live together every single day. It was a regular Tuesday. Toast in the morning, a crumpled permission slip in her backpack, Amelia skipping around the living room with her shoes untied. I was helping her brush her hair into 2 uneven ponytails. She liked them that way when it happened. She looked at me through the mirror and said, "Mum, can you braid it instead?" I froze, just for a second. She didn't notice. She just kept tugging at her sleeve, her face tilted like the request was the most natural thing in the world. "Mom," she repeated, her voice soft but sure. I nodded slowly. "Sure, sweetheart, braids it is." And I braided her hair with the most careful hands I've ever had. She didn't correct herself. She didn't say, "I meant grandma." And I didn't ask, I didn't remind her, because the truth was there was no one else showing up for that title. She had reshaped the word with her own meaning. It wasn't biology, it wasn't paperwork. It was bedtime kisses, warm lunches, early morning rides to school, and someone showing up every single day, even when they were tired, even when it hurt. Later that night, I stood at the sink washing dishes. My hands moved automatically, but my thoughts kept circling that moment. How many years had I spent being a mother to someone who now wouldn't even return my calls? And now, here I was, unexpectedly, beautifully again, to a child who never asked for any of this, but who looked up one day and decided I was her safe place. She had given me a name I thought I'd buried. When she went to sleep that night, I peeked into her room like always. She had her doll under one arm and her book of animal stickers under the other. I kissed her forehead and turned to leave. Just before I pulled the door shut, she mumbled, "Night, Mum." I didn't correct her. I didn't correct anything. I whispered back, "Good night, baby girl." And in that moment, I realized sometimes the family you become means more than the one you were born into, and sometimes the most sacred names are not given by blood, but by love that refuses to leave. We walked into the courthouse hand in hand. Amelia wore her Sunday dress, the one with tiny sunflowers, and I wore the only blazer I owned. She held her drawing folded in her pocket, a picture of our little house, her bike out front, and 2 stick figures labelled "Me" and "Mum." She insisted on bringing it just in case the judge needed proof. The hearing room was small, quiet, with the hum of fluorescent lights and the scent of old paper. The judge was a woman with kind eyes and a firm voice. She asked the questions clearly, one by one, and I answered with my whole chest. "How long has the child been in your care?" "6 months." "Has the mother made any attempt to reclaim custody or provide support?" "No, Your Honour, not once." "Do you wish to continue caring for her?" "With every breath I have left." Amelia sat beside me, her feet swinging off the chair, her hands folded politely. When the judge smiled and said, "And you, young lady, do you feel safe with your grandmother?" Amelia pulled out her picture like a magic scroll. "This is us," she said proudly, "and that's our kitchen window where the sun comes in when we eat pancakes." The courtroom chuckled. The judge chuckled. I cried, quietly, into a napkin I'd stuffed into my purse just in case. After more questions, more forms, and a promise from me that I understood the responsibility I was accepting, the judge cleared her throat and said, "Guardianship is granted, effective immediately." I exhaled. For the first time in months, I breathed. Amelia leaned over and whispered, "Does this mean no one can take me away now?" I nodded, tears falling freely. "That's exactly what it means." We left the courtroom, papers in hand, and she skipped down the hallway like the weight of the unknown had finally lifted from her little shoulders. That night, we celebrated with pancakes for dinner. She drew another picture, this one with a judge in a black robe, standing next to 2 stick figures holding hands. Above it, she wrote, "My forever family." Because sometimes the most powerful legal document in the world is drawn in crayon, sealed with pancake syrup, and framed by a child's belief that she's finally home. The night after the hearing, when Amelia was fast asleep with her new court bear tucked under her chin, I sat at the kitchen table and wrote a letter I knew I'd never send. It was to my daughter, Lydia. "Dear Lydia, today I became Amelia's legal guardian. Today the court gave me what you walked away from, and I don't know if I should feel relief or heartbreak. She waited for your call. Every birthday, every holiday, every random Tuesday. She watched the front door like it might bloom into a miracle, but none ever came. I don't hate you. I just ache in ways I never expected to. Not for me, but for the parts of Amelia's heart that were stitched together by questions she didn't know how to ask. She calls me Mom now, not because I asked her to, not because I replaced you, but because she needed someone to hold that word with both hands, someone who stayed, someone who answered when she cried in the middle of the night and helped her put socks on the right feet. I didn't plan this. I didn't want to start over at 69 with bags under my eyes and a calendar filled with school lunches and dentist appointments. But I will not let her be another child who learns love only as a memory. You were my daughter. Now I'm raising yours. And no matter where you are, I hope one day when the silence catches up to you, you'll remember who stepped in when you stepped away. Your mother. I folded the letter and placed it in the back of the drawer, beneath the birth certificate and court documents. It wasn't meant for mailing, it was meant for me. A way to let it bleed so I could heal. Amelia may never know how close she came to being another forgotten child in a forgotten corner of someone's story, but not in mine. Because this chapter, our chapter, is written in lullabies and backpack zippers, in rainy day puzzles and I love you notes left in lunchboxes. And it's sealed with a promise stronger than blood that the ones who stay rewrite everything. Parent-teacher conference night came quicker than I expected. Amelia had been thriving, drawing, reading, even joining the after-school garden club. Her teacher, Mrs. Kessler, had sent a sweet note home. She's blossoming like spring itself. I wore my nicest cardigan, brought a notepad, smoothed down my hair twice before walking into that classroom. Mrs. Kessler greeted me with a warm smile, then got to the point. Amelia is wonderful, curious, kind, but we had a moment last week. My chest tightened. What happened? She drew a family tree. When I asked who her parents were, she said, "My mum left, but now I have a better mum. She makes pancakes and gives me hair braids and court hugs." I blinked, swallowing the knot in my throat. Court hugs, Mrs. Kessler smiled. She said you hugged her the biggest hug of her life after a judge said she could stay. I nodded slowly. That was a big day for both of us. We talked through her progress. Math was strong, reading above grade level. She needed to work on raising her hand before blurting out answers, but Mrs. Kessler said it with a laugh. At the end, she paused. I just wanted to say, you're doing something incredible. I've worked with kids a long time, and I can tell when love is holding someone up. I thanked her, holding back tears, and left with Amelia's folder clutched to my chest. In the hallway, I watched the other parents, young couples, matching jackets, car keys dangling from fingers, talking about dance recitals and weekend trips. I walked alone, older, slower, but I didn't feel small. I felt exactly enough. That night, Amelia and I sat on the porch with hot chocolate. She leaned against me and said, "Mrs. Kessler said I have a big heart. Do you think that's true?" I looked down at her and said, "You have the biggest heart I've ever known." She smiled and whispered, "You too, Mom." And as the stars blinked above us, I realized something simple and profound. I may not have given her life, but I had given her love. And sometimes that's the only part of the family tree that really matters. It started with a whisper. "I don't feel like going today." Amelia sat at the kitchen table, her spoon motionless in a bowl of soggy cereal. Her eyes stared blankly out the window. This wasn't like her. She usually bounced around in the mornings, singing little made-up songs about socks and scrambled eggs. I knelt beside her. "Something happened at school, sweetheart?" She shrugged, then whispered, "Kendall said I don't have a real mom, that I live with someone else's grandma." The words hit me like a stone to the chest. I took her hand in mine. "And what did you say?" I didn't say anything. I just felt weird inside, like maybe she's right. I kissed the top of her head. Sweetheart, listen to me. There are all kinds of families. Some are big, some are small, some have two moms, some have one dad, some have grandparents who step in and never leave. What makes a family real is love, not names, not who lives where, not who was born to who. She looked up at me, her bottom lip trembling. But you're my real mum, right? I didn't blink. Every bit of me belongs to you. Every hug, every lunch I pack, every story I read, that's as real as it gets. She leaned into me, and I felt her whole body relax like a balloon exhaling. Okay, she whispered. Then I'll go. She got dressed quietly, brushing her own hair that morning like she needed to prove something to herself. Before she walked out the door, she turned and said, "If anyone asks, I'll just say I live with the kind of mum who never stopped showing up." That day, I cried in the laundry room, silently, into a basket of warm towels. Because even with all I'd tried to shield her from, the world had still found a way to poke its finger into her small, brave heart. But it had also revealed something else, something stronger, that she had learned how to speak up, how to name her love, how to stand inside her own truth, even when others tried to shrink it. And that meant I was doing something right, not perfect, but right. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon, the kind where the only sound was the hum of the dishwasher and Amelia humming softly while colouring on the living room rug. Then there was a knock, not a neighbour's knock, not the postman, a sharp, unfamiliar rhythm. I opened the door and nearly dropped my tea. Lydia, my daughter, Amelia's mother. She looked thinner than I remembered, hair pulled back messily, eyes restless. A duffel bag hung off her shoulder like a question. "Can we talk?" she asked. I stepped out onto the porch, closing the door behind me. My hands trembled. "What do you want, Lydia?" she sighed. "I was in a bad place. I know what I did. I want to see Amelia, just for a minute." My breath caught. Months of silence, of blocked calls. And now, this? "You left her," I said, voice steady. "You erased her." "I was scared," she whispered. "I didn't think I could do it." "And what now?" I asked. "You think you just knock and she forgets the tears, the night she sat waiting at the window, the birthday you missed?" Lydia blinked fast, eyes glossy. "I just want to see her." Inside I could hear Amelia humming, peacefully, safely. I turned back to Lydia. "You're not ready. She's healing, and I won't let you tear that open because you're lonely." Silence. Then, "Will you tell her I came by?" I shook my head. "Not yet. Maybe someday, but not until you've done the real work. Not until you prove, not to me but to her, that you're more than just a shadow on the doorstep." She nodded slowly. No argument, no tears, just quiet resignation. Then she turned and walked back down the steps, disappearing around the corner. I went inside, heart pounding. Amelia looked up and smiled. "Was someone here?" "Just a stranger," I said gently, kneeling beside her. "Nothing important." She handed me a picture she'd drawn, us in the gardens holding hands. "I'm making a book of our family. I pulled her into my arms and held her close. Because sometimes the past does come knocking, but that doesn't mean you have to let it in. Not when the future is sitting right there, drawing sunflowers and calling you Mom." Amelia's 7th birthday arrived with soft sunlight and a breeze that carried spring on its back. We didn't have money for a big party, no clowns, no inflatable castles, no magician pulling scarves from his sleeves. But we had streamers from the dollar store, a chocolate cake I made from scratch, and a handmade banner she helped colour that said, "Lucky number 7." She woke up beaming. She wore the pink dress with glitter sleeves. I made pancakes in the shape of hearts. Everything felt warm, light, until she asked the question I'd been dreading. "Will Mummy come today?" I had no words ready. I'd rehearsed versions in my head, gentle ones, honest ones. But in that moment, all I could do was sit beside her and take her hand. "I don't think she's coming, baby," I said softly. "But that's not your fault. None of this is your fault." She nodded bravely, blinking faster than usual. "Okay." Then she asked, "Can I still blow out candles and make a wish?" "Of course," I whispered. "Always." That afternoon, a few neighbours came by. Linda brought lemon bars. Mr. Jenkins gave her a puzzle with animals. We sang, we clapped. Amelia smiled through it all, but I knew she was waiting for one voice, one face that never appeared. After everyone left and we washed the frosting off her fingers, she climbed into my lap and whispered, "I didn't wish for her to come. I wished for you to never go." I wrapped my arms around her so tightly I could feel our hearts speaking to each other. "I'm not going anywhere," I told her. "Not today, not ever." That night, after she fell asleep with her court bear and new books beside her, I sat alone at the table. I looked at the leftover cake, the half-used party hats, and I cried. Not because Lydia didn't come, but because I saw, in my granddaughter's resilience, how children are forced to grow up between the silences their parents leave behind. But also how they survive, how they find new roots in unexpected places. And how love, even when it comes with wrinkles and grey hair, can still make a birthday magical, even without balloons. The summer came slowly that year, like it had to be coaxed out of hiding. Amelia asked if she could have a garden. "Just a little one," she said, "for tomatoes and maybe sunflowers." We found a corner of the backyard that hadn't seen life in years. The soil was tough. The weeds had grown thick like secrets. But she dug with her small hands, and that determined little spirit I loved so much. We spent weekends turning the earth. I showed her how to press seeds into soil, not too deep, not too shallow. She named the tomato plants, Betty, Ralph, and Steve. Every morning she watered them. Every afternoon she talked to them like old friends. "You're doing great, Steve," she'd say, patting the leaves. One evening, I came outside with lemonade to find her sitting on the porch steps, legs dusty, fingers stained with soil. She looked up and said, "I think I'm like the garden." I tilted my head. "How so, baby?" "I started out all messy, then someone helped me grow." I sat beside her, blinking away tears. "That's exactly what you are, a garden girl with roots getting stronger every day." We sat in silence as the sun dipped behind the trees. She leaned her head on my shoulder. "Sometimes I still miss her," she said quietly, "but it's not like before. It doesn't hurt the same." I nodded. "That's okay. Missing someone doesn't mean you want them back the same way. It just means a part of you remembers." She thought for a moment, then smiled. "I think I remember more with love now, less with tears." The tomatoes grew. The sunflowers stretched taller than her. And one morning, she brought in the first ripe tomato with pride written all over her face. We sliced it together, sprinkled a little salt, and shared it at the kitchen table like it was a 5-course meal. That single tomato, that small moment, held the weight of everything we'd built. Because when children begin to bloom, you realize you didn't just save them, they saved you too. It was early fall when Amelia asked if we could repaint the old mailbox. The paint had chipped off in spots, and the red flag leaned a little to the left like a crooked smile. I agreed. We bought a small can of bright blue paint and a new stenciling kit from the hardware store. As we sat on the porch steps, the afternoon sun warming our backs, she carefully dipped her brush into the can. "Can we put both our names on it?" she asked. "Yours and mine?" I hesitated only for a second. "I'd love that." She painted her name first, Amelia, in careful wobbly letters. Then she handed me the brush. I wrote mine underneath, Elaine. When we were done, she stepped back and tilted her head. "It looks like home now," she said. Later that evening, as she played with her court bear inside, I stood alone beside the freshly painted mailbox. And I cried. Not from sadness, but from a kind of sacred peace I hadn't felt in years. Because that small blue box no longer held just bills or catalogues. It held a declaration. We were a family, not patched together by obligation, but by choice. She had been left on my porch with a suitcase and a promise of just a weekend. And 5 years later, she had carved her name into my world, into my routine, into my purpose. People like to talk about broken homes. But what they don't understand is that sometimes broken pieces find each other and fit even more beautifully than the original design ever allowed. Amelia came outside with a letter she'd written for her school writing project. She handed it to me. I unfolded the lined paper and read, "My family is different, but it's perfect. My mom is my grandma. She makes pancakes and gardens and hugs me when I'm scared. We didn't choose how this started, but we choose each other every day." I looked up at her. "You wrote this all by yourself?" She grinned. "Yup, I told the truth." And in that moment, standing beside a mailbox that finally knew our names, I realized truth doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it's a quiet letter painted in blue with love on every line,